Hello, my name is James. I'm a portrait photographer from Portsmouth in the UK. You've probably not heard of me, and I welcome you to this latest video on the Portrait of a Wrestler YouTube channel. And we're looking at Photoshop today, looking at white backgrounds and how to get a nice clean white background. But generally, I'm quite reluctant to do Photoshop tutorials online. There's never one answer to achieving one specific effect in Photoshop. There's always sort of millions of different ways to get to essentially the same outcome. So I'm just going to show you the way that I would get to the outcome of producing a nice clean white background for your high key portraits. Here's 3 ways that you can do it, 2 ways that I wouldn't do it, and the way that I would definitely do it. We're going to start off here. We've got an image here of Tony Storm, who's been photographed in my home studio, which is quite a small space. There's not a massive amount of room to get distance from the background to the subject and use our backlighting effectively to create a nice clean white background. We have to sort of work with what we've got here. And so because of that, there's a few lights in the background where it's quite a small space. There's a few rivets in the brickwork. There's a few things there in the backdrop that could be just sort of taken out, and it's not the cleanest of backdrops. So we're just going to see if we can create a nice clean white background for Tony here. This is the first way that I wouldn't do it. We're going to select the magic wand tool, which is up here, and then by selecting the magic wand tool, we get all of these selections up at the top here, and we're going to go to select subjects. And what select subject's going to do is it's going to use the AI within Photoshop to select around Tony there. That's a one-click option, which is really useful. We can now Control-C, Control-V, copy and paste there, and we can see that we've made a second layer there. With Tony completely away from the backdrop there. So what we can do now is we can create another layer down here, and we can pretty much just paint in. We can find the paint bucket tool, select it onto white, and then just paint a white layer and drag that layer underneath Tony, and there we have a nice clean white background there for Tony. The only problem with this method is that the AI is exactly that. It is artificial intelligence. So when it does come to selecting the areas, you might find that it's pretty good, but you might find that when we go in close here, you'll see that it's sort of missing out bits of hair there, and we can refine that using the layers, but I don't think it's possibly the quickest way that we could potentially do it. So we'll go back to it and we'll go for method number 2. Method number 2 here is we're going to hit Control M and we're going to bring up our curves. We're going to hit the white pointer here and click that and grab ourselves a white pointer, and we're going to try and find the darkest of the grey there in and amongst the background and just click on that and make that our new white point, which will then bleach out and bring everything in to white behind there like that. So now we have a nice clean white background, but what we do have, unfortunately, is that we've affected the skin tones, because it's affected all of the tones within the picture and moved the white point to shift all of the mid-tones and the lighter tones all into sort of highlight there. So what we can do here is we can bring up our history panel here, grab our history brush, click on the point a couple of steps back there before we affected the white spot, and then we can just brush over Tony's face and hair and bring all of that back into tonality around the picture there, and it should give us that nice clean white backdrop whilst also retaining all of the detail there in the skin tones. But again, quite a laborious way to go about it here. You potentially could miss some things off. It's okay if you're only just missing the white spot. It does allow you a little bit of flexibility in terms of which parts of the image you want to bring back in and which parts you don't. We do have a reasonably clean backdrop there, but it's possibly, again, not the most effective way of doing the image, because it does sort of damage the detail in the subjects in the foreground. So we're going to have a look now at way number 3. And this is the way that I do it if I'm looking to refine a high key image. I'll go down here into my layers and I'll click on levels, and I'll bring up a levels layer above the layer of our subject here. This is a non-destructive layer. So what I'll do is I'll grab my levels panel here and I'll grab the shadow area, and I'm just going to drag it around to around about midway. And what that's done there is it's allowed all of the background areas, the brickwork, little bits of the backdrop there, some things in the wall, all of the little bits of texture, all of the bits that aren't quite pure white to be darkened down, so I can see them a little bit more clearly, so I know exactly where I'm going. Then I'll go into my background layer, back into the original, grab my dodge tool, and I'm going to take off protect tones and I'm going to switch it to highlights with an exposure somewhere between 5 and 10% there. Now what I can do is I can take that dodge tool working on the background layer underneath my levels layer, and I can start to brush away all of the areas of highlight reasonably carefully on a reasonably soft brush, and start to paint away the areas of shadow just behind, without destroying, without manipulating the pixels within the subject in the foreground. The higher the exposure level on this dodged brush, the more vicious it's going to be in terms of the way that it dodges out the details. But we can see that because it's set on highlights, it's not going to affect the shadow areas in and around what Tony's wearing. We've got a nice clean cutout there. Let's go back into our levels panel and just drag that in just a little bit more, and then we can really start to see there's just little areas there that just need a little bit of attention again. So go back into the background area, back in with the dodge brush, just dodge around these areas nice and carefully, making sure that we've got every area of highlight around. There we go. Take our eraser tool, set onto black and white with black as our foreground area and white as our background area, and just delete the two lights that are either side there. Take our crop tool, crop around, add a little bit of levels in there just to give it a little bit of oomph. Because it was actually lit like that in studio, we don't have to manipulate anything digitally afterwards to give the effect of a white highlight in the background. We've just achieved it there, and there's no pixels in that background whatsoever. The foreground has been perfectly preserved as we shot it, as we wanted it to look at the time. We've got a perfect high key image there. So there's 3 ways there to create a perfectly white background for your high key portraits. One quick one completely destructive one, and one with a little bit of care and attention there that just gives you complete control over all the images. If you've liked this video, you can hit the like or subscribe button, or both buttons. You can give me a follow on the Instagram and the Twitter at Y2JimBob. It's Portrait of a Wrestler everywhere else, and as ever, all the very best.